For as long as I could remember, Friday dinner at the Bennett house had felt less like visiting my best friend and more like coming home. I knew which cabinet held the plates, which chair his dad always claimed, and exactly when his mother would tell us to stop arguing and eat before the food got cold. Nobody asked whether I was staying. I simply stayed. His little sister still stole fries from my plate. His mom still complained when I skipped dessert, and Daniel still kicked my ankle under the table whenever I said something that made his dad laugh too loudly. That night, though, something was wrong. It started with a chair. Mine was usually beside Daniel, close enough that our elbows bumped whenever one of us reached for the potatoes. But when I walked into the dining room, my chair had been moved to the other side of the table. I stopped for half a second, then laughed quietly to myself. Maybe they had needed the space. I pulled it out and sat down anyway. Daniel looked at me, then at the empty space beside him. "You can sit here," he said almost immediately. His mother glanced toward us before lowering her eyes to her plate. "Let him sit there tonight," she said. Her voice was gentle, but it sounded strangely careful. I smiled as if I hadn't noticed. "It's fine." Dinner continued, but the usual rhythm never returned. His sister started to ask me about work, then stopped when his father looked at her. His mother offered me bread, but instead of reaching across the table like she always did, she placed the basket in front of Daniel and asked him to pass it. Even the small things felt deliberate. Daniel noticed. I could tell because he kept watching me instead of eating. When I finally looked back at him, he lowered his voice. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Why wouldn't I be?" He didn't answer. Under the table, his foot brushed mine, then stayed there for a second before he pulled it away. It was such a familiar gesture that I almost smiled. Almost. Because for the first time, I wondered whether I was the only person at the table who didn't know why everything suddenly felt different. I had spent years believing there was one place in the world where I would never have to question whether I belonged. Now, sitting inside the same house with the same people, I wasn't so sure anymore. Saturday morning, I woke up still thinking about the moved chair. I told myself it was nothing. By the time I reached the Bennett house, I had almost convinced myself. Daniel opened the door before I could knock, already dressed, his hair still messy from sleep. "You're early," he said. "You said you needed help." "I did." He stepped aside immediately, letting me in without the usual joke about charging me rent. The house looked exactly the same, but the feeling from last night hadn't disappeared. His mother was in the kitchen. She smiled when she saw me, but the smile faded almost as quickly as it appeared. "Morning," she said. "Morning." I waited for her to tell me what she always told me. "Grab something to eat, make yourself comfortable, you know where everything is." Instead, she simply returned to what she was doing. Daniel noticed my expression. "Come on," he said, touching my shoulder briefly as he guided me toward the living room. "I need your opinion on something." It was such a normal thing for him to do that I almost relaxed. We spent the next hour working through the small problem he'd asked me to help with, but even that felt different. Normally, his family wandered in and out, interrupted us, argued about something, and treated me like I had been there all morning. Today, everyone seemed to give us space. Too much space. When his sister came downstairs, she stopped at the doorway. "Are you guys going somewhere later?" she asked. Daniel looked at her. "Why?" "Mom said not to bother you." She disappeared before either of us could answer. I stared at him. "Okay, that's weird." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "They're just being careful." "Careful about what?" He looked at me for a moment, then away. "Nothing." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You know I'm not stupid, right?" "I know." "Then stop acting like I'm going to break if you tell me something." His expression tightened. Before he could answer, his mother called him from the kitchen. He started to leave, then turned back. "Wait here." "Why?" "Just wait." He walked away, leaving me alone in the living room. A few minutes later, I heard voices from the kitchen. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard my name. Then silence. Daniel came back looking more unsettled than before. "Are you okay?" I asked him. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." He sat beside me instead of across from me. His shoulder touched mine. I just don't want you thinking you did something wrong. That sentence stayed with me. I looked at him. Then why does everyone suddenly act like I'm a guest? He didn't answer. He only looked down at his hands. And when I finally said, maybe I should stop coming over so much, his head snapped up. Don't. The word came out too quickly, too strongly. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he lowered his voice. Don't say that. The word don't stayed between us long after Daniel said it. I had never heard him sound like that when I talked about leaving. He usually joked when things got uncomfortable, or changed the subject before either of us had to say something serious. This time he didn't. Why? I asked. Why does it matter so much? He looked toward the kitchen. Because you're my best friend. The answer should have been enough. Once it would have been. But after the strange dinner and the careful silence around the house, it felt incomplete. That doesn't explain why everyone else is acting differently. Daniel stood. I know. Then tell me. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His mother called his name again from the kitchen. He glanced at me. Stay here. Daniel. Please. He walked away. I stayed on the couch, listening to the low voices from the kitchen. At first, I couldn't understand them. Then I heard my name again. His mother's voice was quiet. You can't keep avoiding this. Daniel answered, but I couldn't catch the words. His father said something next, followed by a silence that felt longer than it should have. I stood before I had time to think about whether I should. I didn't walk into the kitchen. I only moved close enough to hear. I'm not asking you to stop caring about him, his father said. I'm asking what you expect us to do. Daniel's voice came back, tense and low. Nothing. I just needed you to know. My stomach tightened. His mother spoke again. We know how much he means to you. There was another pause. Then don't make him feel like he's being pushed out, Daniel said. I stepped back before anyone could see me. For a moment, I just stood there, trying to understand what I'd heard. They knew I mattered to him. That much was obvious now. But why would that make them treat me differently? Daniel came back into the living room a minute later. He stopped when he saw me standing. His face changed immediately. You heard something. It wasn't a question. I folded my arms. Enough. He looked nervous in a way I had almost never seen. What did they tell you? Nothing. I heard you. He went quiet. You told them I matter to you. His eyes dropped for a second. You do. That's all. What do you want me to say? I didn't know. That was the problem. I had known Daniel for years. I knew when he was lying, when he was annoyed, when he was trying not to laugh. But this version of him was unfamiliar. He looked like someone trying to hold back a sentence that could change everything. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. He looked directly at me. Because I didn't know how. I felt something shift between us. Not an answer. Not yet. But enough to make the silence feel different. For the first time, I understood that whatever had changed inside this house hadn't started with his family. It had started with something Daniel had said to them. And now I needed to know what he had left unsaid. By Sunday afternoon, I had stopped pretending the strange feeling in the Bennett house was going to disappear on its own. Daniel had asked me to come over and I almost said no. Instead, I found myself standing at their front door again, wondering whether I was walking into the same home I had known for years or into something I no longer understood. His mother was setting food on the table when I entered. You're staying for dinner? She asked. I hesitated. If that's okay. She looked at Daniel before answering. Of course. The words sounded sincere, but there was still something careful underneath them. During dinner, nobody said anything about the conversation from Saturday. That somehow made it worse. I kept watching Daniel. He barely touched his food. Finally, his father put down his fork. We should talk about this. Daniel looked at him. Dad. Not like this, his mother said quietly. Then when? Daniel pushed his chair back and stood. I'll handle it. I stared at him. Handle what? He looked at me, and for once he didn't avoid the question. You deserve to know why things have been strange. His parents exchanged a glance. His father nodded. Daniel took a breath. They're worried about what happens next. Next with what? I asked. With us. The word landed harder than it should have. His mother looked at me. You have always been important to this family. I know. That's why this is difficult. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're making it sound worse than it is. His father shook his head. We're trying to understand. I looked between them. Understand what? Nobody answered immediately. Then I pushed my chair back. If this is about me, I should be allowed to hear it. Daniel stood too. It is about you. Then say it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I don't want you to leave because things feel different. Then give me a reason to stay. His expression changed. The hesitation I'd seen since Friday finally broke. Because I don't want you here just because my family treats you like their son. I stared at him. What are you saying? Daniel swallowed. I'm saying I haven't been honest about why it matters so much when you pull away. His eyes stayed on mine. I don't just care about you because you're my best friend. The room went completely quiet. He looked terrified, but he didn't take the words back. I have feelings for you, he said. Real ones. And that's why everything changed. For a few seconds, I couldn't make myself answer. Daniel stood across from me, his confession hanging between us, while his family remained silent in the background. How long? I finally asked. He looked down. Long enough that I stopped knowing what to call it. I let out a nervous breath. And you told your family? He nodded. I couldn't keep pretending it was. Nothing. They noticed how I was with you. I told them the truth before I was ready to tell you. That explained the careful looks, the moved chair, the sudden distance. But it didn't make everything easier. So that's why they changed? I asked. Partly. Daniel rubbed his hands together. They didn't stop caring about you. They just didn't know how to treat you after I told them. I looked toward the dining room. The same table where I had eaten hundreds of meals suddenly felt unfamiliar. And what exactly did you tell them? That you're the person I think about first. That I don't like watching you date other people. That when you talk about leaving, it scares me more than it should. He gave a small, embarrassed laugh. I told them I didn't know what would happen if I kept pretending you were only my best friend. My chest tightened. All those years of small things suddenly seemed different. The way he always saved me a seat, remembered what I liked, noticed when I was upset before anyone else did. I had always called those things friendship because that was the only explanation I'd allowed myself. Why didn't you tell me? I asked again. Because you mattered too much to risk losing. He took one step closer. And because I didn't know if you felt the same. I looked at him. The fear in his face made the answer feel impossible to avoid. I think I do. He went completely still. You think. I'm trying to understand it. I swallowed. I've spent years thinking your family was the safest place I had. And now I find out the person I always came here to see might be the reason everything feels different. Daniel's expression softened. I don't want you staying because of my family. I know. I want you here because you choose me. The words changed something. For the first time, this wasn't about whether I could keep my place at their table. It was about whether I wanted a different place beside him. I reached for his hand, hesitated, then let my fingers touch his. He didn't pull away. Neither of us said anything else. We didn't need to. We both knew the old version of our friendship was gone. What we didn't know yet was whether we were brave enough to choose. What came after it? The next morning, the house looked normal again, which somehow made everything harder. I sat at the kitchen table while Daniel made coffee, and for a few minutes neither of us mentioned what had happened the night before. His mother moved around the kitchen as she always did. His sister complained about something on her phone, and his father read the news. Nothing was openly wrong, but I could feel the difference in every small gesture. When Daniel placed a mug in front of me, his fingers brushed mine, and we both paused. His mother noticed. She didn't say anything. Before, I would have laughed it off. Now I couldn't. Later, Daniel found me alone on the back porch. You don't have to avoid me, he said. I'm not avoiding you. You've been quiet all morning. I looked through the window at his family. Everything feels different. He sat beside me. Because it is. That's what scares me. He was silent for a moment. Do you regret telling me? No, his answer came immediately. Do you regret knowing? I looked at him. No, that should have made things simple. Instead, it made the problem clearer. I had spent years knowing exactly who I was in this house. Daniel's best friend. The extra son. The person who could walk into the kitchen without knocking and stay for dinner without asking. Now every familiar thing carried another meaning. Daniel reached for my hand, but stopped before touching it. I don't want you staying here because you feel responsible for what happens to us. I'm not. You looked like you were thinking about it. I looked down. He knew me too well. What if this changes everything with your family? I asked. It already has. His voice was quiet. But that doesn't mean I want to go back. I finally looked at him. What if they don't want me around anymore? They do. How do you know? Because they love you. He paused. But I don't want you to confuse being loved by my family with being chosen by me. The distinction hurt because I understood it. For years, belonging had been enough. Now I wanted something more, and wanting more meant I could lose the safety I had always taken for granted. That afternoon, when his mother asked whether I would come by again next weekend, I almost said yes automatically. Instead, I hesitated. Daniel noticed from across the room. So did she. You don't have to decide right now, she said gently. I nodded. For the first time, I realized that staying wasn't as simple as walking through their front door. If I stayed, I had to stay because I wanted Daniel, not because his family had made a place for me. And if I couldn't separate those two things, maybe the only honest choice was to leave. By Tuesday evening, I had made my decision. I stood in the Bennett kitchen with my hands in my pockets, waiting for Daniel to come back from the other room. His mother was washing dishes, and his father was clearing the table. Everything looked painfully familiar. The same cabinets, the same table, the same ordinary sounds. I suddenly understood how much I had taken all of it for granted. Daniel walked in and looked at me. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. I nodded. I think I should. His face tightened. Why? Because I don't want to be the reason your family has to figure all this out. They can figure it out. Maybe. But I can't keep pretending nothing changed. He stepped closer. I never asked you to pretend. No, but you asked me to stay. Because I want you here. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. I looked away. That's exactly the problem. He went quiet. What does that mean? It means I don't know if I'm staying because of you or because your family has been my family for years. I swallowed hard. And I don't want either of us wondering whether I chose you because I was afraid of losing them. Daniel stared at me. So you're just going to leave? For a while. And what happens after that? I don't know. His expression changed from confusion to something closer to fear. You really think walking away makes this easier? For everyone, maybe. Not for me. I looked at him. Daniel? No, he shook his head. You don't get to decide what's easier for me. His voice wasn't angry. It was desperate. You think I'm going to be fine if you stop coming here? If I don't get to see you every day? If you become someone I used to? No, because you're trying to protect my family from a situation I chose. I couldn't answer. He stepped closer again. I told them because I was tired of hiding what you mean to me. I told you because I couldn't keep lying to you. And now you're going to leave because you're scared of what happens when I actually choose you. The words hit harder than I expected. What if choosing me costs you your family? I asked. Then I'll deal with that. You don't know that. Neither do you. His eyes stayed on mine. But I know what it costs me to let you walk away. Neither of us spoke. His mother had stopped washing dishes. His father stood quietly near the doorway, listening without interrupting. I looked at Daniel one last time, trying to find the easy answer that would let me leave without hurting anyone. There wasn't one. I picked up my bag anyway. Daniel watched me move toward the door. For one terrible second, I thought he would let me go. Then he stepped in front of me. If you walk out that door, he said softly, I'm coming after you. Because I'm done letting fear decide this for us. Daniel stood between me and the door, and for a moment I couldn't move. His words had taken away the last excuse I had been holding on to. I could still leave. Nothing physically stopped me, but now I knew exactly what leaving would mean. You can't just follow me because you're scared, I said. I'm not scared of following you. His voice was steady now. I'm scared of losing you. I looked at him, and something inside me finally gave way. What about your family? I asked. Daniel glanced toward his parents. His mother was still standing by the sink, his father beside her. Neither of them looked angry. They simply watched him, waiting for him to decide what he wanted to say. Daniel turned back to me. My family will always be my family, he said. But you don't have to disappear just because things changed. He took my hand. This time, there was no hesitation. I spent years letting everyone think you were just my best friend because I was afraid of what would happen if I admitted I wanted more. I told myself that keeping everything the same was protecting you. His thumb moved slowly across my knuckles. It wasn't. It was protecting me. I felt my eyes sting. Daniel. No. Let me finish. He looked directly at me. You asked me to give you a reason to stay. Here's the truth. I don't want you here because my parents love you. I don't want you here because you've always had a seat at this table. I want you here because when I imagine my life without you in it, I don't recognize it. The room was silent. His father finally spoke. Then don't make him leave. Daniel looked back at him. His mother nodded, her eyes soft. We may need time, she said. But that doesn't mean he isn't welcome here. I looked at her. You really mean that? She smiled sadly. You've been part of this family for years. That didn't disappear because Daniel finally told us the truth. The words loosened something in my chest. I turned back to Daniel. And what happens now? He gave a nervous smile. Now I stop pretending. He stepped closer. And you? I took a breath. I stopped pretending too. His eyes searched mine, almost as if he needed to make sure I meant it. I did. I leaned toward him and he met me halfway. The kiss was brief, careful, and completely different from every imagined version I had carried without admitting it. When we pulled apart, Daniel laughed under his breath, almost disbelieving. I smiled. So we're really doing this? If you want to. I looked at the family around us, then back at him. I do. He squeezed my hand. Then stay. This time, I didn't hear it as a request to remain in the house. I heard it as a choice. I nodded. I'm staying. 3 days later, I walked into the Bennett house and felt something I hadn't expected. It still felt like home, but I no longer wondered whether I was allowed to be there. Daniel was in the kitchen, and when he saw me, his face broke into the same smile I had known for years. Only now I understood what had always been underneath it. His mother called us to the table, and without thinking, I reached for the chair beside Daniel. It was the same place I had always sat. His father looked at me and smiled. There you are. We were waiting. I laughed softly and sat down. His sister immediately stole something from my plate, just as she always did. Hey, I protested. You haven't changed, she said. Neither have you. Daniel's knee touched mine beneath the table. This time, neither of us moved away. His mother brought out dessert and placed a bowl in front of me. You'd better have some, she said. You know you're not leaving without it. I looked around the table. A few days ago, those words would have meant everything to me because they proved I belonged. Now they meant something different. I didn't need the family to stay exactly the same to know I had a place here. And I didn't need their acceptance to understand what Daniel had chosen. He had made that choice himself. Under the table, his fingers found mine. I squeezed them. Nobody made a big announcement. Nobody needed to. The awkwardness was still there in small places, and I knew some things would take time. But the fear that had made me consider walking away was gone. Daniel leaned closer and whispered, You okay? I smiled. Yeah. Sure. I looked at him. I think I'm finally where I'm supposed to be. He smiled and turned back toward the table. I had spent years believing this family treated me like their own son, and I had thought that was the greatest kind of belonging I could ever have. Maybe it was. But now I understood something I hadn't been ready to see before. Being welcomed into someone's family was one kind of love. Being deliberately chosen by the person you loved was another. And sitting beside Daniel, with his hands still holding mine beneath the table, I finally had both.